Hello everyone, and it's good morning, good afternoon or good evening depending on where in the world you are, and it's hello from sunny London. So welcome to FIPP's latest webinar, which we've entitled Digital Opportunities for Magazine Media Publishers. And this is to support the latest FIPP World Digital Media Factbook report, which we launched recently. It's the third edition. It's got a wealth of detail on digital media revenues and usership trends. Now, the report is edited by Martha Stone, who's the Chief Executive of World News Media Networks, and I've asked Martha to come along today and present an analysis of what all this data means, and importantly, what advice would she give to magazine media groups looking to grow their business. So before introducing Martha, can I just explain how the webinar works? Martha will be making the presentation. We'll be moving the slides along. During the presentation, if you have questions, you can use the dialog box, which you will see on your screen. Pose your question, send it, and we'll pose them to Martha at the end. If there are questions for clarification, if something is said that you don't understand, ask the question, and I will interrupt just to clarify points, but largely we'll keep the questions to the end. And also at the end, I'll be able to tell you how you can get a copy of the report, and when we shall have the webinar broadcast and the slides from this webinar available on the FIPP website. So more of that at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, Martha, over to you.
Well, thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here once again to talk about the Factbook. And hello to everyone in the audience who's interested in knowing what the present and future usage and revenue trends are for magazines and media in general. We've been doing this book now for 9 years, 3 years for FIPP, and the World Digital Media Factbook includes every digital media trend that's going on, including social media, video, mobile and smartphones, tablets, even gaming that's being integrated now in advertising and content, and everything that is coming down the pike now in the future. We're tackling issues of, for example, augmented reality and wearables, the Internet of Things coming up in the next edition. This is a living, breathing, changing Factbook every single year as the digital trends change. And we have it available in multiple ways through the FIPP website. So we not only have the Factbook itself in PDF format, it's also available in print, and it's also available in iPad edition and app edition, and also atomized as graphics themselves. And so depending on what you need these data sets for, they're available in multiple ways for you to use. And as time goes on, we will continue to publish in every way that is necessary for publishers today in the magazine world in order to achieve their strategic goals. We have a special way of publishing. We both compile the latest and greatest studies that are available with permission from the best names in the business, like Nielsen, PwC, and Global Web Index, all of the most verifiable and well-researched studies in this area, both on the usage side and the revenue side. But we also conduct our own studies, and one of those is an innovation study that we do where we survey media companies around the world in 10 different languages every year to understand what the trends are in individual media companies. And we're very grateful to FIPP as one of our sponsors that makes this all possible. So moving on to the actual data sets. There are 500 data sets in this report every year. It seems to grow every year a bit. And this year, 500 data sets, more than 230 pages of content with analysis along with these charts. And a good way to start really is to kind of explore how how this is all happening. Why are we seeing such a changing of the digital media landscape? Every single year it's changing, growing, expanding, and making us as publishers, making our work lives very challenging to stay on top of the trends. And the whole objective of this report is to help us stay on top of the trends and to understand why this is happening so that we can apply these trends to our businesses and in order to reach our audiences. So the chart you see is identifies the kind of synergistic scenario we need in order to make use of the trends that are happening today. So I created a schematic that basically shows that three main stakeholders really drive the digital media landscape in each and every geography. And I should point out that one learning over the last 9 years of doing this research is that the overriding fact is that it depends on where you are in the world as to what the trends are. So what's happening in China may not be happening what's happening in Bermuda or what's happening in South Africa. Every place is different in the way that people are using trends and the way that companies are monetizing trends. And the three main stakeholders that drive this are audience, in other words, how are people using devices like smartphones and tablets, and how are they consuming magazine media on different platforms, for example. And then how are publishers responding to that? How are they publishing? And are they responding to the audience? Are they publishing on multiple platforms, on multiple devices? And they can't really do that unless the audience is there. But I think the most important element is this. Advertisers need to monetize these areas in order for the publishers and the audience to engage in the digital media. And so advertisers are starting to buy advertising for smartphones, for example, in various parts of the world, not all, and also on tablets. We're seeing an emerging trend in that regard as well in various parts of the world, not all. And in order for us as publishers to grab hold of these opportunities, we'd have to have the audience and the advertising in order to make a go of it. So it's sort of like a synergistic effect that we need to achieve in order to make growth happen in these various channels and these various platforms. So I'm going to talk about the platforms. I'm going to talk about the various channels on which to publish digitally, and I'm going to show you how very different each of these countries behave. Now, according to Deloitte, which is a great source of information as to how people are engaging in different platforms and different media, we can take a look at this chart, which basically shows the time spent on various screens. Screens including television, which you see in the purplish blue color, laptop and PC, which you see in the aqua color, smartphones, which you see in the purple color, and the tablet usage, which you see in the gold color. And you can see that the various patterns are very different. And you can also see that there's a great deal of time being spent in the top 10 countries that I have outlined here. Indonesia, Philippines, China, Brazil, and Vietnam, to name the top 5, have quite a robust usage pattern when it comes to using various screens. And then you probably are asking yourself, minutes per day, in the hundreds of minutes per day, how can that be? And the answer is not only are people using these media individually, they're also using them simultaneously. And we're seeing that as a really interesting trend that's going on right now around the world, multitasking on various screens. And probably all of us have done that, right? We're watching television while we're using our smartphones, or we're using our laptops or even our tablets as we are watching television. And this is a verifiable trend corroborated by some of the other research that we are doing. But you can see that, perhaps if you look down at the bottom of the chart, according to Deloitte, in Japan, France, and Italy, there's significantly less usage happening on the various screens. And you can see that the balance of the different screens are quite different as well. So this basically tells us as publishers what the opportunities are in various kinds of screens. In Indonesia and Philippines, for example, there's a great deal of usage happening on tablets. And of course, tablets have always been an opportunity on which to publish for magazines, but maybe not in all countries, because if you look at Italy, the opportunities might not be as great in terms of the usage patterns that are going on. So you can explore this for your own country if your country is on this list, or even you may have your own studies that your companies have been doing that identifies usage on screens. But whatever the case, this shows us the opportunity on how we can publish today. Another area that is unique, that shows us the uniqueness of various countries, is this chart that we do every year based on CIA data from the United States and also from Internet World Stats. What this shows us is the hotspots around the world in terms of usage, engagement, saturation of usage for both phones, mobile phones, and for desktop Internet. And as you can see from the 2014 map, you can see that pretty much the northern hemisphere, including, as you can see into the right, all of Europe, Russia, the United States, and Canada are what we would call the hotspots in red. But as you can see in purple, there are hotspots in only mobile, but not desktop Internet. Why is that? Well, we've been doing this map since 2006, and this map morphs every year. When we started in 2006, there were hardly any hotspots. The only hotspots were happening in Northern Europe, North America, and Japan and Australia. Today, as you can see, there's a whole lot of change going on in terms of what countries are engaging in both the desktop Internet and also mobile phones. And what this tells us is every place is different in the terms of the devices that are being used to access the Internet in particular. So we have, for example, in purple, hotspots in mobile. We're seeing happening a lot in Latin America and in Africa, for example. Why? Because they are leapfrogging the Internet, desktop Internet, and going straight to accessing the Internet on mobile. And in the book this year, there's quite a large article about the trend of leapfrogging the desktop and laptop PC usage and going directly to accessing and utilizing content on mobiles. This shows us there's an opportunity to publish magazine media on our mobile devices everywhere in the world, but in particular those places where perhaps PCs and desktop models and also laptop models are not being used as much, especially in the southern hemisphere, and that we're going directly to mobile. This is an opportunity and one that you should really take into consideration when you are publishing in your various on your various platforms, and you're creating your strategy in doing so. Now, this chart shows underscores what the map showed, but this is also from Deloitte. It's a different source of information, but it corroborates what's happening with the mobile Internet. And what's happening is that in only one short year, from May 2013 to May 2014, the use of mobile Internet as a percentage of web usage has doubled. And this shows the acceleration by which mobile Internet is being utilized. And why is that? That's because from many studies, what we're finding is that smartphones and tablets, phablets even, provide us all of the power that we need to access the Internet, and that in many places in the world, this is becoming the default device on which to access the Internet. I'm going to show you in just a little while about what kinds of content are being accessed by various devices, just to kind of underscore what's happening in this chart. But just suffice to say that the acceleration of use across the world in every continent is almost doubling in one short year, and I'm quite sure that that acceleration is continuing today. Now, let's look at smartphones in the developing world markets, and you can see what kind of growth we are seeing in terms of the use of smartphones in the top 15 markets in the developing world. And you can see that China on the top has population penetration of smartphones of 1/3 or 31% of a huge population of more than 1.3 billion people. Whereas if you look at India with almost an equal huge population of 1.22 billion people, they only have a 10% penetration of smartphones. But quite frankly, it's still a huge number and exceeds almost everywhere else in the world, even though they only have a small penetration in their own country. This and other countries listed here that you can look at and pore over at another time, because this PowerPoint will be available to you on the FIPP website for free. You will be able to see each country and what the how many millions of people now have smartphones, and what the penetration of smartphones is in your country. And the reason this is important, and the other thing here that's important, is the subscription growth rate that you see in the third column. You can see that in 1 year, that the growth rate is in the high double digits in many of these countries, which means that this is just the beginning. There's going to be a huge number, larger number of smartphone penetration in each of these countries in the short term and long term. And I would even step out on a limb and say that this will become a highly penetrated device for just about everywhere in the world in the next decade. Now, if we go beyond the developing world and look at the Internet markets across the world, including the developing world and the developed world, you can see that the Internet penetrations and the Internet growth is starting to top out in some countries, because the percentage rate is slowing down in the developed world. In the United States, for example, the growth rate for 2013 is 2%. In Japan, 0. Why? Because the penetration has reached pretty much a plateau. It is pretty much saturated. Those who are going to use the Internet are pretty much already spoken for. And but if you look at China, the growth rate is 10% and in 2013, and because we only see a penetration in China of 46%. They have a long ways to go before the entire huge country is saturated with Internet use. And then if you go down to Brazil and Russia, you see also a double-digit % growth rate, both in 2012 and 2013, because their penetration rates are only half of the population, the adult population, currently has Internet access. So I think that what this tells us is that this is just the beginning, especially in the developing world, in terms of how people are using the Internet and what the opportunities might be for magazine publishers around the world, country by country. Now, I promised you that we would show you some top online activities that are happening on different devices, on PCs, on mobile, and tablet. And as you can see, people access different kinds of information on different devices, although in some cases there are similar amounts of usage, accessing various kinds of information. But there is a reason why some devices are used for certain kinds of activities. So I wanted to go over those a little bit. On the top you see activities where mobiles are leading in terms of usage of webmail, for example. Again, mobile being the dark blue line, you see that jutting out a little bit for accessing webmail, accessing weather online, using social media, uploading photos, and managing social media profiles, and using instant messengers. These are easy things to do on a smaller screen. Whereas, if you compare desktops and laptops, you can see that watching video clips is popular, searching for a product or service to buy, purchasing a product online, and using online banking tends to be in the bailiwick of the PC usage. I think that what this tells us as magazine publishers is that we need to publish on both devices for sure, on mobiles and PCs and, of course, tablets. But that if we are to build user interfaces for various platforms, that perhaps we want to concentrate on doing a really great job on the places where people tend to live, to do these activities, such as video clips in particular, searching for products online. These are activities that are really opportunities for magazine publishers today. And these are, kind of proven areas of high traffic for magazine publishers, and user interfaces should reflect that, that now that we know that these are popular areas to access magazine media information, we shouldn't give up desktop laptops because these are still being used. And by the way, tablets also are leading in these areas, and tablets also should be developed for the access of video and e-commerce situations. Now, this is a little bit different view on content access by device, and in particular, checking information, entertainment information, playing an online game, watching a full-length film. These are all different activities that may play into our strategies as magazine publishers. You can take a look at the different activities here, the content access that people tend to do on the various devices to see where magazine media might fall. But there are clearly applications in terms of commenting on stories and accessing video that play into our strategies as magazine media publishers. Now, in terms of social media, a huge area of growth for digital devices and digital platforms, we can see that the access to social media varies greatly from country to country. And I think that also tells us a story about how we should play our content on our websites. In Argentina, Mexico, Thailand, and the United Arab Emirates, for example, it would be a huge mistake not to integrate some sort of interaction, some sort of social media engagement into magazine media digital publishing, because it just is such a popular area of time spent for the people who live in these countries. Sometimes when I give presentations at various places around the world, I'm asked, why is that? Why is Argentina different from, say, Japan in terms of the numbers of hours spent every day on social media? And while I'm a researcher and I go by facts, sometimes we have to extrapolate what is happening in these charts and why is it that these things are happening. I think that one of the main reasons for these numbers of hours being spent in some countries and not others is cultural. And if you can think of the stereotypical activities that are happening in various parts of the world, we see a lot of activity happening in Latin America, for example, in terms of interactivity on social media in general. Whereas in some parts of Europe and even in Japan and South Korea, in Asia, we don't see as much interaction as we do in other parts of Asia in terms of social media. Another driving force is what we're seeing with natural disasters, occurrences that drive social media. And it could also be things that are happening, not just natural disasters, but major events that are happening in the country. Maybe it's a big sporting event like World Cup soccer or something like that, which drives big spurts of social media activity. And in those cases, if there is something like that happening that impacts your magazines, that there should be special social media activities being built for that purpose. As an example, the Olympics. There were, even in the last 2 Olympics, there was some major instances of social media. There were just huge numbers of people interacting, centering around all the sporting events happening during the Olympics. But there had to be special infrastructure being built in anticipation of that, and user interfaces and so on. And I think that in order to take advantage of the social activities centering around your content of your magazines, there needs to be activity venues, let's just say, in order for the people who love your content and love whatever you are covering, so that they can discuss this on your website instead of elsewhere, like on Facebook or Twitter, for example. And you have to be the hub where the social media is taking place, and you can orchestrate that on your own digital platforms and take advantage of that traffic that's happening. And one of the spoils of the social media traffic, of course, is advertising spend. And as you can see, the projections for social media spend from now until 2015 are in the double digits in North America, and worldwide 9.9% from 2014 to 2015. But what this tells us is that the digital ad spend for social network advertising is growing, and the reason it is growing, as you saw from the first chart that I showed you, is because traffic is growing. And I think that publishers, magazine publishers, need to get into that fray in order to achieve the social media spend that's happening around the world. Speaking of ad spend, let's take a look at how social media, how the different ad spend breaks down in terms of market share according to Magna Global. Now, the global media mix, I've pointed to the 7% of media spend happening for magazines there, whereas the digital spend for mobile, video, and other digital is growing. And I'm going to show you another chart that shows how it is growing over time. On the right-hand chart, you can see how different continents are faring. And frankly, it depends on where you are as to how much ad spend, as always, is being distributed throughout the world. And as you can see, it's about an equal amount in Asia Pacific and North America at 33% in each place, whereas EMEA, for example, only 28%, and Latin America only 7%. Now, according to Zenith Optimedia, which we like to show every year, they have very good statistics. We can see that desktop internet and mobile internet at the bottom, the red arrow at the bottom of 2013, you see a smaller amount than in the projections for 2016 for the same spend in gold and the blue color at the bottom of the chart. You can see a considerably higher spend for digital platforms. And frankly, the smaller, a shrinking amount on the top red arrow in the sort of soft green color, both for magazines 7.9% in 2013, down to 6.4% in 2016. And what this tells us is that, of course, while magazine media for print is in decline, we have big opportunities in digital. Now, in the last few weeks or months, I have been giving presentations around the world about these statistics. And what we're hearing is the same thing anecdotally from what's happening in these markets in China, for example, and Latin America, and in Australia, North America. We're hearing the same thing: decline in print media and a huge growth in digital media, and therefore a huge opportunity. But there's also an interesting opportunity to put the two together as a package when you're selling advertising. So while these numbers on the top for print media don't look as sexy as we'd like them to be, there's still an opportunity when packaging together print and digital. Now, this is just as one example of a region that shows these numbers in a different way. In the book that is available on the FIPP website, on the Factbook, we have 5 of these charts, one for every region of the world. But I'm only going to show you Asia Pacific just as one example, but they pretty much look similar to one another. So what we're seeing is flat line for print media, the line in purple at the bottom with the red arrow. But then when we're talking about the internet advertising, ad spend, the hockey stick is going straight up, and the projections into 2016. So this is once again a reminder that the growth rate continues for the foreseeable future. Whereas TV in Asia and elsewhere continues to grow as well. And I think that tells us that it's not all traditional media are in decline. In fact, television continues to grow in every region of the world, according to, in this case, Zenith Optimedia, but corroborated by other studies that we keep tabs on every year. Now, if we only look at global magazine ad spend, you can see that in every region of the world, as I said, magazine media is either flatlined or in decline. On the top, you see the highest volume magazine ad spend continent is North America, followed by Western Europe, but with shockingly similar lines, actually Western Europe being in an even steeper decline than in North America. And then followed by Asia Pacific, and then down below, much lower volume in terms of ad spend, but pretty much flatlined for print advertising expenditure. So where is the growth? If not in print media, then where are the biggest growth drivers? And of course, as I've said in this presentation before, it is first mobile internet. This is where the highest opportunity is. And in this case, Zenith Optimedia has broken down these numbers to be the contribution to global ad spend by medium. In other words, which are the media that are contributing the most to the growth of ad spend. And on the top of the heap is mobile internet, but followed very closely by television and slightly distantly by desktop internet. And lo and behold, magazine media is showing a negative contribution to ad spend growth. In other words, they are in decline, as are, even to a higher degree, newspaper ad spend. So again, this shows us in the magazine media that that we have a huge opportunity here to grab hold of some of the ad spend that is available for mobile internet growth. And I would say to you, if you are wondering, should I get into publishing on the mobile internet, that would include smartphones and tablets and phablets, I would say if you're not in it already, I would say that you have to take an accelerated approach to your strategy. And in fact, I would shudder to think that you are already late in the game, having not already engaged. Why? Because those companies that are already taking advantage of the spoils of mobile internet advertising are 5 companies, basically, according to our research: Google, Yahoo, AOL, Facebook, and Twitter. And Microsoft, I'm sorry. And in order to get into the game, you have to stand up to the likes of those huge global companies. But in order to do that, I think that locally, advertising on your mobile devices is essential. And you should engage in this and formulate a strategy that includes partnerships, that includes very aggressive selling to engage in your valuable mobile platforms. Now, PwC is a very robust researcher in the area of all media, including magazine media. They particularly look at revenues being made for magazine media, and their conclusion is that total magazine revenue will return to growth by next year, but it will be driven by digital. So what this chart shows us is sort of it's corroborating the information that we're getting from Global, Magna Global, and from Zenith Optimedia, where magazine media, print in particular, is going down, but that the digital, which you see in red on the red bars down below, you see a steady growth of digital magazine publishing revenue, which includes both circulation and advertising revenue. And this is what is driving the return to growth according to PwC. Once again, if you're not in the game of digital advertising in an aggressive way, you need to do this and take advantage of the trends that are so obvious. Now, this is a very complicated chart, but I'm going to try to simplify it for you, and you can take a look at it more closely later on. Instead of taking a close look at the regions that are being represented on these little charts, I want to show you the opportunity for various forms of mobile advertising that may or may not work in your markets. So basically what this chart shows us is, first, the various forms of mobile advertising, and then it breaks down the 10 different countries surveyed and how they are the percentage of smartphone users that are receiving advertising in this regard. What this tells me is this. This tells me where the opportunity lies in your markets or in markets like yours. So in terms of applications, for example, in-app application advertising, you'll see that in various parts of the world, especially in the developed world, you'll see opportunities for in-app advertising on mobile phones. So that's one avenue you can go down. The one country that falls short in that regard is, in this case, India, and to some degree, China. I'm sorry, Turkey, not China. But here are some other opportunities for you for various advertising forms that you can sell in your markets. Mobile internet advertising, in other words, display advertising. The oldest and used to be the most effective form of advertising, the simplest advertising, text message or SMS advertising, which is in decline now, but in some places in the world, it is still a viable option. Streaming online music and radio is a smaller option, but an option for creativity and advertising. Online gaming, both for, what's really popular right now is online gaming both for content and for advertising. In this instance, why not create advertising in the form of a game? Location-based services and GPS types of advertising, a smaller opportunity, but an opportunity nonetheless. And then watching video and mobile TV advertising, it's a bigger opportunity in some places than others. My prediction is that it's a growing area because it is so easy to be able to access video these days on our smartphones. And I believe that this is an opportunity for us for the future. When this survey was taken in 2013, it was a smaller opportunity, and I believe it to be a bigger opportunity for the future. Moving just right along, we have also the frequency of mobile advertising, just to look at this phenomenon in a different way. So in some parts of the world, the percentage of smartphone users receiving ads on their handsets in the same 10 countries is different. And I think that also shows us the degree to which people receive advertising on their mobile handsets, which also gives us a clue into how we should be selling mobile advertising as people are receiving them, what the expectation is, and what is happening today in these particular markets. So the first bar you see, which is in Australia and Brazil and China, happening at least once a day, these various forms of advertising, mobile advertising are being served. Whereas if you look at a place like India, for example, there are far fewer ads being served on a daily basis. And as you recall from one of the charts I showed you, only 10% of the huge population of India has smartphones. That number is growing, of course, and this probably explains why the number is so low in this case for India, as just one example. Now, this is also a complicated chart, but I'm going to simplify for you, and you can look at the more complicated part later on. What this shows you is the opportunity known as programmatic advertising. And if you are not in the game of programmatic advertising today, you must get into the game. Basically, programmatic advertising is the present and the future. And as you can see from these bars, there is a steep increase from 2011 to 2017, according to Magna Global, which is a global research company. But this is also corroborated by many studies about programmatic advertising. Really, to simplify what programmatic advertising is, it is basically the ability to automatically serve advertising across publishers' websites and to be able to then allow through automation the serving of ads to targeted groups of people. So if you have a magazine media company about golfing and there is a golf company that wants to serve ads, They can do this in an automated way to reach the people in your website, your target audience only, and to be, therefore, in theory, more effective with their ad campaign. This is happening in the trillions of ad service every year, of ad serving that's happening across the world. And this is the wave of the future. No longer, I believe, no longer will there be a lot of human intervention in terms of the serving of ads across digital platforms. So this is the future. It is an irreversible trend, and this is something that you must engage in with your company. Also there is an upside in that there are higher CPMs or cost per thousand, higher price for these advertisements as they are targeted. This basically really puts the burden on you as publishers to understand your audience better, to have good metrics in which to provide to the programmatic advertising services so that the proper amount of targeting happens so that you can get the highest CPMs possible for your websites. But once again, you must get into this game. It is the future, and there's no getting around it. This is the way digital advertising is being served today. Content marketing is also a huge area and also an area ripe for magazine media. At the moment, magazine and newspaper publishers are making billions of dollars on content marketing. And according to this chart by Adobe and eConsultancy, based on a study of marketers, content marketing was the top marketing priority for global businesses in 2013. And I suspect the same, once 2014 is done, that will also be the case. This is a huge trend, and there are two ways to handle your strategy for content marketing, or also known as native advertising. One is to create your own native advertising department where your own journalists or writers are running it, and for the brand advertisers. And just to remind you what content marketing is if you don't know, it is basically creating branded websites within your website, within your publisher website, with text, video, photos for that brand. So let's say your client, your advertising client, is Coca-Cola, and perhaps they want to do a website on going green and branded by Coca-Cola. You can do this in two different ways. You can partner with them and they provide the content from Coca-Cola on going green, or they will hire you and your journalists and your writers, photographers, and so on to create it for you. And the two different models are being utilized today in the likes of Forbes, for example, Vice.com, just to see some examples online of how magazine media are handling content marketing today. It's a fascinating area, and it is an area where you can make a lot of money if you become aggressive at selling these campaigns that live on your website on behalf of these brands. Lo and behold, according to the Global Web Index, we find this very interesting nugget of information. The global sources of product discovery on the top of the list are articles in newspapers and magazines' websites. To me, this little nugget of information on ways users find out about new products, brands, and services on magazine websites shows me that this is a huge opportunity for magazine media to take advantage of this, to be the go-to place for product discovery. And you can be the link in the chain for e-commerce. E-commerce is a huge opportunity for magazine media. It is being leveraged by some of the biggest brands of magazine media across the world. We've seen in the several magazine conferences I've gone to around the world in the last couple of months, It certainly is being leveraged by many companies, including, well, all of them actually, and not just fashion brands. Many of us have heard case studies about how fashion brands like Vogue and Glamour are utilizing e-commerce. And then people are discovering, various fashions that they can purchase on these fashion websites. No, it's not just fashion. We're in magazine media also exploring various ways to sell other products and services, including our own stores with our own brands. For example, Golf Digest and selling golf paraphernalia. Travel magazines selling travel holidays. It can be anything. But the fact is that you have two choices in building your e-commerce businesses to take advantage of this trend where people trust you to give you information about products, services, and brands. And that is you can build your own complete beginning to end e-commerce operations, including inventory, which is a risk, but there's a higher reward. Or you can partner with, let's say, fashion brands or golf brands or whatever your magazine happens to be, and then build your e-commerce strategy around that, around a partnership. That's less of a risk and, of course, then less of a reward. There are case studies in both. For example, the Full Throttle e-commerce fashion magazine, probably one of the first examples of e-commerce is Hearst in Japan, where they've created a very successful e-commerce operation selling fashion. They own the inventory, the fashion inventory, and they own the end-to-end business. And they then reap the rewards of owning the entire business. But it has been quite a slog in terms of the risk in owning the whole business. Whereas, I would say most of the e-commerce businesses that that magazine media are engaged in today are more of a partnership model. Both are possible. It depends on which ones you have the stomach for. But both of them are something to consider, and I would say that e-commerce is definitely something you should be engaging in 2015. So I'm going to speed up a little bit. This is just one example of what the m-commerce purchases look like in various regions, and you can see that there's more of an appetite for m-commerce in Asia Pacific, for example, in Latin America, and less of an appetite, for example, having used this and want to do more in the United States, for example. And then the larger bar at the right says having used but want to do more in the future, and tends to be more popular, say, in Latin America and in EMEA, for example. But this just shows us what the examples are for m-commerce. And all of this is made possible by our devices. And as you can see, the future of devices is basically in smartphones, as I've said before with the other research. And to some degree, a larger growth of tablets, according to Deloitte, once again. But you can see that there is a huge explosion of smartphone device sales projected here up until 2018. And that shows where the markets are headed and the opportunity. This shows a dramatic example of how fast tablet sales and phablet sales are growing, and that also signals an opportunity for us in the magazine media. And PwC corroborates that by saying that there is a correlation then between the growth of tablet active device sales and the consumer magazine digital circulation revenue. There's a direct correlation according to PwC. And that shows us that there is an opportunity to publish more aggressively and maybe in a more interesting and robust fashion on our consumer magazines today. So thank you very kindly for your attention. I've enjoyed speaking to you virtually, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Martha, thank you very much for that. That was great. As we see lots of information, and I would urge you to either get the slides or download our digital edition to get the full details. A couple of questions that came in during the course of the presentation. First of all, I think you've just answered it towards the end there. Does the report have data on e-commerce trends? That was a question from South Africa.
Yes, there is a huge section on e-commerce that goes into detail not only about what is being purchased on e-commerce, but also where the trends are around the world. And I think that it's really important to note, once again, that these trends are geographic and that the opportunities are different in each part of the world, but that it is a pervasive trend wherever you go.
Okay, and a question from Germany, which was on programmatic. The viewer noticed that programmatic predictions for USA and the UK were sort of 80% and 60%, but for Germany only 33%, which seems strange. Can you explain why that should be?
Well, I think that that there isn't a lot of illumination about why on these reports, but that suffice it to say that the growth is happening everywhere, and that in this case, Magna Global makes this projection. I would say that what I take away from this chart is not exact numbers, because this is a new area of exploration for us, but what I would say is that there is a significant and irreversible trend that's going on here. So don't get hung up on the numbers as much as getting hung up on this is opportunity. Even visually, if you look at each and every country, there is a steep growth that isn't going away, and that you must get on the train and ride the train for programmatic. And do everything you can to take advantage of this trend.
Okay. Final question I'm going to pose has come in. Is the biggest challenge for smartphone mobile devices the network coverage in each country? And as an explanation, I'm surprised by your chart that the Northern Hemisphere is behind the BRICS, unless I have misunderstood your chart. I'm not sure. I think I can recall the chart being referred to, and I think actually you only covered developing countries. I don't think you had the sort of developing countries in there.
The map? The map or the chart?
Well, I think it's not clear from the question. I think it was the chart.
Okay, the developing world here. This is just the developing world chart, and I think that maybe what this person might be referring to, if that person's still on, perhaps they can clarify. But that shows the opportunity for smartphones. But if we go up to the map, you can see that in terms of the BRICS, you have Russia in the hot zone. You have Brazil in the hot and mobile zone, India, hot and mobile zone, and let's see. And Russia is in the hot zone. And then China in the hot zone. So basically, you have significant mobile usage in each of the BRIC countries.
But I think that's right. But I think the statement about network coverage being the challenge is probably correct. Martha, I'm going to cut the questions there because we've run out of time. I've just got a little bit of information for the people who've been listening into this. If you want a free digital edition and your company is a member of FIPP, you can download from our website, and it's free. If you want the print edition, or if you're not a member of FIPP, you're going to have to buy, I'm afraid. All the details can be got from the FIPP website, but if you want to speak directly to Helen Bland, my colleagues responsible, it's the very complicated address of helen@fipp.com for any inquiries. As we've said before, this slide presentation will be available as a PDF, and in fact the webcast itself will be available within 24 hours. Give us a little time to put it on. I just need to make a couple of thank yous, obviously to Martha for the presentation. Talked non-stop for nearly an hour, Martha, well done. I'd like to thank our brand partners, Press Reader, who produced the digital edition of the report, and I'd like to thank Blipper for all of the interactive elements of the digital edition itself. So there's the thanks. And finally, if you want to keep up to date with everything to do with magazine media, keep logging on to FIPP.com. Thank you.
Thank you.